The blizzard hit with a fury that turned the world white in seconds, and Logan McKenna had exactly enough time to grab his horse's reins and run for the cave. He'd been checking his trap lines when the temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many minutes. The sky turned the color of old bruises. The wind came from the north, like the breath of something ancient and hungry, and the snow didn't fall so much as it attacked, horizontal and blinding and deadly. "Come on, Copper," Logan shouted to his bay mare, pulling her toward the limestone cliff face he knew was somewhere ahead in the white chaos. "The cave? We have to reach the cave." The horse followed, trusting him even though she couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. Logan navigated by memory and instinct, knowing that if he missed the entrance, they'd both be dead within the hour. This wasn't just a snowstorm, this was a killer blizzard, the kind that buried entire homesteads and wasn't found until spring thaw revealed the frozen bodies. Then he saw it, the dark gap in the white wall of snow, the cave entrance. And beyond it, the cabin he'd built inside the cave, the structure everyone in Silver Ridge had mocked for an entire year. McKenna's Cave Castle, they'd called it, the Hermit's Hole. The building that made no sense to people who thought homes belonged on flat ground under open sky, not tucked inside limestone formations like swallow nests. Logan pulled Copper through the cave entrance, and immediately the howling wind cut off. The temperature, while still cold, was noticeably warmer than the deadly chill outside. The cave's natural protection was already saving their lives. He led the horse deeper into the cave, past the narrow entrance passage, and into the larger chamber where his cabin stood, a solid log structure built entirely within the cave, sheltered by millions of years of stone above and around it. The cabin's door was 20 feet from the cave entrance, giving him a buffer zone. He got Copper into the small stable area he'd built adjacent to the cabin, also inside the cave, and threw blankets over her steaming back. "Good girl," he murmured, checking her over. "We made it." Through the cabin's window, a real glass window he'd packed in carefully, he could see the cave entrance. Beyond it was nothing but white fury. The blizzard that meteorologists would later call the worst in Montana history had arrived, and it would rage for 5 days straight. But inside the cave, inside his cabin, Logan was safe. He had firewood stacked in the dry cave chamber. He had food stores that stayed cold but not frozen thanks to the cave's stable temperature. He had water from a spring that flowed year-round deeper in the cave system. He had shelter that no wind could touch, no snow could bury, no cold could fully penetrate. The home everyone had laughed at was about to prove its worth. But to understand why a man would spend a full year building a cabin inside a cave while his neighbors mocked him, you have to go back to the beginning. It started the previous spring when Logan purchased the old Callahan property, 20 acres of rough, rocky land that included a significant limestone cave system. Most people thought the land was worthless. Farming was impossible on rocky ground. The cave was just a geological curiosity. "What are you planning to do with that?" Sheriff Morrison asked when Logan filed the deed. "Build a home," Logan replied. "Where?" "I don't see any flat ground out there." "Inside the cave." Morrison stared at him. "Inside the cave? You mean a cabin inside the cave?" Exactly that. The news spread through Silver Ridge like wildfire. Logan McKenna, the quiet former scout who'd arrived last fall with money from his railroad work, was planning to build a cabin inside a cave instead of on normal land. Like a normal person? "That's insane," declared Mayor Thompson at the saloon. "Why would anyone choose to live in a cave?" "Because caves provide what open ground doesn't," Logan tried to explain at the town meeting. "Constant temperature year-round, protection from wind, rain, snow, natural humidity control, and most importantly, shelter from extreme weather events." But it's a cave, Victoria Hanson protested. Dark, damp, probably full of bats. That's not civilized. The cave I'm using is dry, well ventilated, and yes, I'll have to deal with some bats, but they're actually beneficial. They eat insects. As for light, I'll have windows and oil lamps, and the temperature inside stays around 55 degrees year-round. That's warmer than winter and cooler than summer. What about flooding? Someone asked. Caves flood. Not this one. It's elevated above the floodplain, and I've surveyed the drainage patterns. Water flows past it, not into it. For every objection raised, Logan had an answer. But people had already decided. Building in a cave was crazy. Logan McKenna was wasting time and money on a project that would fail. The construction began in late spring and provided endless entertainment. Logan's first task was clearing the cave chamber, removing loose rocks, leveling the floor, assessing the ceiling stability. The cave was massive. The main chamber where he'd build his cabin was over 30 feet wide and 20 feet high, with a naturally arched ceiling that had been stable for millennia. McKenna's playing caveman became the running joke. Someone should tell him we evolved past living in caves, Mayor Thompson would say. To laughter, maybe he thinks he's a bear, gonna hibernate in there all winter. But Logan continued, ignoring the ridicule. He understood something they didn't, that the cave wasn't a primitive dwelling place but a natural structure with properties no man-made building could match. The cabin itself was built with careful craftsmanship. Logan used solid logs for the walls, creating a sturdy structure that stood within the cave like a house within a house. The roof was slightly sloped to manage the minimal moisture that did occur in the cave. He installed a proper door, windows on two sides, facing the cave entrance for light, and even a small porch area. The chimney was clever. It vented through a natural chimney in the cave ceiling, a crack that led to the surface. Logan had tested it extensively to ensure proper draw. The smoke would rise through the natural vent, invisible from the outside, leaving no obvious sign of habitation. For his horse, he built a small stable adjacent to the cabin, also inside the cave. Copper would have shelter, hay storage, and protection from predators and weather. He's building a whole homestead in a hole, people marveled, shaking their heads. What happens when the cave collapses on him? Victoria asked. That cave has stood for thousands of years, Logan replied when he heard the comment. It'll stand for thousands more. Limestone caves don't just collapse unless you're actively destabilizing them, which I'm not. The construction took all summer. Slowly, Logan's cave refuge took shape. He added details that showed his careful planning. Storage areas built into natural alcoves in the cave walls, a root cellar in a deeper chamber where the temperature was even more stable, a water collection system from the cave spring, and ventilation channels that took advantage of the cave's natural airflow. By late fall, the cabin was complete. It looked strange, a solid log cabin standing inside a massive stone chamber, like something from a fairy tale. But it was comfortable, surprisingly well lit from the windows and oil lamps, and remarkably cozy. Logan moved in with Copper, living in his cave refuge while the town watched and waited for disaster. Give it one winter, they said. He'll come crawling back to civilization when he freezes or goes crazy from isolation. Winter came, and Logan thrived. The cave's stable temperature meant his cabin stayed comfortably warm with minimal firewood. He didn't have to battle wind. Snow and ice didn't accumulate on his roof. Copper was protected and content in her cave stable. It's unnatural, some muttered, watching smoke occasionally drift from the hidden vent in the hillside. It's practical, Logan would reply if asked. I'm using natural shelter that's already perfect. Why fight the elements when you can live where they can't reach you? But comfort wasn't the property that would vindicate Logan's choice. That came later, during the winter, when the worst blizzard in recorded history proved that sometimes the oldest shelters are the strongest. The signs started the day before. A drop in barometric pressure that Logan noticed on the simple barometer he kept in his cabin. The birds disappeared. The air felt electric. Copper was restless in her stable. Big storm coming, Logan told himself, checking his supplies. He had plenty of everything: food, firewood, water, hay for Copper. He was ready. What he didn't know was that this wouldn't be just a big storm. It would be catastrophic. The blizzard hit that afternoon, as described at the beginning, catching Logan out but close enough to reach safety. The temperature plummeted to 30 below zero. The wind speeds exceeded 60 miles per hour, with gusts much higher. The snow came so thick that visibility dropped to arm's length. In Silver Ridge, 5 miles away, people were trapped. Those caught outside when the storm hit froze before they could reach shelter. Those indoors found their homes inadequate. Wind drove through every crack, cold seeped through walls, snow piled so deep that doors couldn't open. The Cooper family's chimney got blocked by snow-driven wind, and smoke filled their house, forcing them into a back room with all the blankets they owned. The Morrison house lost its roof when the wind got under a loose shingle and peeled back half the structure like paper. The town's church, built to withstand normal storms, had every window blown out by the force of the wind. But in the cave, Logan and Copper were safe. The blizzard raged outside the cave entrance. They could hear it, a constant roar like a living thing. But inside the cave chamber, the wind couldn't reach. The temperature stayed constant. The cabin remained warm and dry. Logan spent that first evening tending to Copper, who was shaken but safe. "Good girl," he murmured, brushing her down. "We're all right. The cave's protecting us." The horse seemed to understand, gradually calming as she realized the terrible sounds outside couldn't hurt her here. The blizzard lasted 5 days. 5 days of nonstop snow and wind. 5 days where venturing outside meant death. 5 days where the temperature didn't rise above -20. In Silver Ridge, terror, people burned through their winter firewood supplies trying to stay warm. Food ran low because no one could reach their outdoor storage. Water froze solid. Several elderly residents died despite their families' best efforts to keep them warm. But in the cave, life continued almost normally. Logan maintained his routine, caring for Copper, cooking meals on his stove, reading by lamplight, staying warm with minimal firewood because the cave's thermal mass helped maintain temperature. On the third day, he did something that would have been impossible for anyone in town. He walked to the cave entrance, protected from the direct wind by the entrance passage, and observed the storm from safety. The world beyond was white chaos, but he could stand and watch it without immediate danger. "Like watching hell from heaven," he murmured. When the blizzard finally broke on the 6th day, Logan knew he needed to check on Silver Ridge. The temperature had risen to a merely cold 10 degrees. The wind had died. He could travel. He saddled Copper and rode the 5 miles to town, moving carefully through snowdrifts that were taller than a man in places. What he found was devastation. Buildings damaged, chimneys collapsed, people huddled in whatever shelter remained. The town had survived. Barely, but the cost was high. 7 dead from the cold, dozens injured, property damage that would take months to repair. Sheriff Morrison saw Logan approaching and stared as if seeing a ghost. "McKenna, how did you survive?" "The cave," Logan replied simply. "Copper and I were completely protected, but we thought, in a cave during a blizzard like that, the cave is what saved us. Constant temperature, no wind, stable structure. We were safer than anyone in town." Word spread quickly. Logan McKenna, the hermit in the cave, had weathered the worst blizzard in history in perfect safety, while the civilized town had nearly been destroyed. Mayor Thompson approached, his face haggard from 5 days of fighting to keep his family alive in a house that proved inadequate. Your cave. Could it shelter more people if another storm comes? The main chamber could hold maybe 20 people and several horses if needed, Logan replied. It's not huge, but it's safe. Would you be willing to open it as an emergency shelter? For the town? Logan looked at the damaged buildings, the traumatized faces, the clear evidence that surface structures weren't enough. Yes, but people need to understand. It means trusting something they've mocked. Can they do that after what we just lived through? Thompson shook his head. They'll trust anything that works. The transformation was immediate. The cave that had been a joke became a lifeline. Logan agreed to maintain it as an emergency refuge, and the town council voted to compensate him for supplies and upkeep. But more than that, people's attitudes changed. Several families asked Logan to help them identify caves on their properties that might be reinforced or built in. The concept of cave dwelling went from ridiculous to revolutionary. Thomas Brennan, the town's builder, came to study Logan's construction. I need to understand this, he admitted. I've been building for 20 years, and my houses nearly failed. Your cabin in a cave survived perfectly. What am I missing? You're not missing anything about building, Logan explained. You're missing something about location. A well-built house on exposed ground is vulnerable. A simple cabin in a protected cave is safe. It's not about the building. It's about the environment. Over the following months, as Silver Ridge rebuilt, Logan's Cave Refuge became a model. Not everyone built in caves, suitable caves were rare, but people incorporated the principles, seeking natural protection, building in sheltered locations, understanding that fighting nature head-on was less effective than working with natural advantages. The cave became a community resource. When severe weather threatened, families would bring their elderly and children to the cave for safety. Logan built additional sleeping platforms and supply storage to accommodate refugees. Years later, when a journalist came to write about the town that learned to hide from winter, Logan gave an interview in his cave cabin, Copper standing contentedly in her stable nearby. Mr. McKenna, when you built this, everyone thought you were crazy. Did you ever doubt your decision? Logan smiled, stroking Copper's neck. Every builder doubts. But I'd studied caves, understood their properties, done the mathematics on thermal stability and wind protection. I knew it would work. Their mockery was based on assumption. My confidence was based on knowledge. Do you ever regret the isolation, living apart from town? I'm not isolated. I'm protected. There's a difference, and I have Copper here. She's better company than most people, and she never mocked my cave. The horse nickered, as if in agreement, and Logan laughed. What would you say to people who think cave dwelling is primitive? I'd say that primitive just means older than we're used to. Humans lived in caves for thousands of years because caves work. We didn't abandon them because they failed. We abandoned them because we forgot their advantages. Sometimes the oldest solutions are the best ones. When Logan McKenna died peacefully in his cave cabin at the age of 71, with Copper, now an old mare, standing in her stable nearby, the structure passed to his nephew with the stipulation that it remain available as emergency shelter in perpetuity. The entrance to the cave now has a plaque, "The Cave Refuge Built by Logan McKenna, mocked as madness, proven as wisdom." When surface dwellers froze, the cave dweller thrived, teaching that sometimes safety lies, not in building higher, but in sheltering deeper. Modern survivalists and off-grid enthusiasts study Logan's cave cabin as an early example of using natural formations for human habitation. Several families in the area have since built in or adjacent to caves, understanding the advantages Logan demonstrated. But in Silver Ridge, now a small but thriving town, they remember the simpler lesson. that mockery often masks fear of the unfamiliar, that crazy and wise can look identical until circumstances reveal which is which, and that sometimes the person building something strange understands survival better than everyone calling them foolish. The cave still stands, of course. Caves always do. The cabin inside needs occasional maintenance but remains fundamentally sound, protected by stone that was old when humans first arrived on this continent and will be here long after the last wooden structure has rotted away. And in the small stable area, though copper passed years ago, there's still a small memorial, a horseshoe mounted on the wall with a simple inscription, Copper, who trusted the cave when humans doubted. Because in the end, the story of the cave refuge isn't just about a man who built wisely. It's about trust. Trust in knowledge over opinion, trust in mathematics over mockery, and trust in a horse who followed her human into darkness and found safety there. The blizzard that nearly destroyed a town couldn't touch the man in the cave. The cold that killed couldn't reach the cabin protected by stone. And the lesson remains carved in limestone and memory, that sometimes the strangest shelter is the strongest fortress, and the person everyone calls crazy is the only one prepared when winter shows its true face.